قد كفاني علم ربي من سؤالي واختياري فدعائي وابتهالي شهيد لي بافتقار.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. And welcome to another video on the Islamic Knowledge YouTube channel. And today we're looking at this amazing kitab written by Shaykh Al-Fattah Abu Ghuddah titled Safahat min Sabr al-Ulama ala Shada'id al-Ilm wa Tahsil. I mean, it's an absolute classic which I'm sure many scholars will have already read. And I would genuinely advise for any student of knowledge who's in the third year or fourth year to actually read this kitab. It's in Arabic. The Arabic may be challenging in certain places because of Shaykh Abdul Fattah's writing style, but you may need a dictionary with you, but you will be able to get through it. And inshallah ta'ala, you'll find the book absolutely tremendous. So the book is all about the sabr, the patience that the ulama went through in going through and enduring the difficulties of acquiring knowledge, and also the difficulties that they endured in acquiring books and looking after their library and all of these different aspects that are related to ilm. Printed by the son of the author, Salman ibn Abdul Fattah Abu Ghuddah, and it's been printed by Darul Bashair al-Islamiyya. Now the book actually starts off with a really beneficial biography of the author written by the son. So who knows his father better than the son himself, and that is Salman ibn Abdul Fattah writes a biography on Shaykh Abdul Fattah. It's a really detailed and beneficial biography. Then the book, you could say, is divided, and as we know, Shaykh Abdul Fattah's books are really beneficial in the sense that they have a fantastic and beneficial index at the end. I just want to have a look at the Fihris Ijmali. So if we look on page 396, we've got a summarized index of this book. So it starts off with, you could say, the muqaddimah of the طبعة الثالثة الثانية الطبعة الأولى, and then we've got the book divided into, you could say, about 9 sections. You've got part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6, part 7, part 8, and then you've got the final addendum, so to speak. The first part is all to do with في أخبارهم في التعب والنصب والرحلة في طلب العلم وقطع المسافات, that the endurance that they had in searching for knowledge and in traveling far and wide to acquire knowledge. Then you've got aspect number 2, في أخبارهم في هجر النوم, how they used to give up all of their desires of sleep, of enjoyment. Then you've got how they would endure the patience that was required due to the destitution, the poverty that came with acquiring knowledge. في أخبارهم في الجوع, how their hunger and all of that they would cover, despite the fact that they are hungry, they are still going after knowledge and acquiring the knowledge of deen. في أخبارهم في العري الدائم ونفاد المال, the amount of money that they lost in acquiring knowledge. The books that they lost in Al-Janib al-Sadis. Al-Sabi' is all to do with how they would sometimes have to give up their family time and their time with their loved ones due to their engrossment in knowledge. The 8th aspect is في أخبارهم في بذلهم المال الكثير وبيع المملوكات والمقتنيات لتحصيل العلم وتدوين المؤلفات, that how they would have to essentially give up so much wealth to kind of acquire knowledge, and they would give it all up in order to acquire knowledge. Now, I just want to look at some few interesting stories when it comes to losing books, because I know, even in this day and age, this is one that remains even relevant to us, others also, but sometimes you're writing a file, you're writing something, you're working on something, and you lose the document, or you might be writing something and you actually physically lose the book. It happens to all of us, and it is quite saddening, but I just want to quote from page 273. There's a lovely story here about the Ustad, the teacher of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, by the name of Hafiz ibn al-Mulaqqin. And he's written a book titled Al-Badr al-Munir and many other books, but he was kind of really engrossed in writing books, and that was one thing he was really good at. So writing books was his thing. So Hafiz al-Sakhawi rahimahullah says in Al-Ulama في ترجمة الإمام الحافظ عمر بن علي بن أحمد الوادي آشي الشهير بابن الملقن المولود بالقاهرة سنة 723. I'm just going to miss out the death dates just to shorten the video. وقد بلغت مؤلفاته نحو 300 مصنف. قال السخاوي قال شيخنا أي الحافظ ابن حجر وكان عنده من الكتب ما لا يدخل تحت الحصر, that he had loads of books, Ibn al-Mulaqin, right? So guess what happened? ثم إنها احترقت مع أكثر مسوداته في أواخر عمره. but then majority of his books were lost because of a fire, and they got burnt. فَفُقِدَ أَكْثَرُهَا. So the majority of the books were lost. Can you imagine? You spend your life writing books, it's the one thing you're good at doing, and the majority of them are lost in your lifetime. وَتَغَيَّرَ حَالُهُ بَعْدَهَا. And poor man, he actually like lost his, you could say, it affected his mental state, as it would, I mean, naturally. فَحَجَبَهُ وَلَدُهُ إِلَى أَنْ مَاتَ. So his son wouldn't even let him out of the house because he wasn't in the right mental state of mind. He lost all his books. So then Hafiz ibn Hajar, he sent him a poem to kind of console him. And it's really nice to see this interaction between a student and a teacher. And you can see Ibn Hajar is also feeling the pain of Ibn al-Mulaqin having lost his books. So he writes him a poem saying, لا يزعجنك يا سراج الدين إن لعبت بكتبك ألسن النيران. That, do not let it worry you, O Sirajuddin, the fact that the tongues of the fire or the flames of the fire have played with your books. Again, by the way, my pronunciation of the poem may be incorrect or not stopping in the right places, so do pardon me for that. لله قد قربتها فتقبلت. You sent them for Allah, right? And therefore they've been accepted. وَالنَّارُ مُسْرِعَةٌ إِلَى الْقُرْبَانِ. And we know that the fire was one of the things that Allah Ta'ala would use in the past, especially when it came to Banu Israel, etc., to accept the qurbani, to accept the slaughtering or the sacrifice of the Banu Israel was the fire. So anything that's burnt from your library of books that you wrote, don't worry, it's been accepted by Allah and you wrote it for Allah, so don't worry about it. And really you can see the kind of pain that Ibn Hajar is also feeling as he's writing those words. Despite him obviously later on not having perhaps the best, he's critical of certain views of Ibn al-Mulaqin in certain places. But I just want to quote a few more stories. On page 237, we've got a story of the hunger that Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah would also go through. And this was a constant theme throughout the lives of the scholars. The fact that they would have to essentially go through quite a bit of hunger, etc. as well. So he says that سمعت أبي يقول, this is Hafiz ibn Abi Hatim's kitab, in the footnotes. Anyway, I'm just going to quote the story. سمعت أبي يقول بقيت بالبصرة في سنة 14 و200 8 أشهر وكان في نفسي أن أقيم سنة فانقطعت نفقتي فجعلت أبيع ثياب بدني شيئا بعد شيء حتى بقيت بلا نفقة ومضيت أطوف مع صديق لي إلى المشيخة وأسمع منهم إلى المساء فانصرف رفيقي ورجعت إلى بيت خال فجعلت أشرب الماء من الجوع. I do apologize that this is talking about Abu Hatim al-Razi, not Imam al-Bukhari, but there is a story of Imam al-Bukhari. I've given footnotes on this page. I think it's here. خرجت إلى آدم بن أبي إياس في عسقلان فتأخرت نفقتي حتى جعلت أتناول حشيش الأرض. Imam al-Bukhari would used to drink or used to eat, you could say, literal translation would be grass, because of the fact that he had never had any food and his provisions came to an end. In this story is Abu Hatim al-Razi talking about the fact that I would cover my hunger by drinking water. Literally, he was covering his hunger by drinking water. So these are the sacrifices that the scholars of the past went through in order to provide us with our knowledge that we have today. And in many ways, there's another story here on page 234 where Zayd ibn al-Hubab would actually teach from behind a veil because he wouldn't have any clothes, simply because he can't afford them. He's just not got any clothes. He's run short of clothes, and therefore he would actually have to teach behind. كتبت عنه بالكوفة. Imam Ahmad is saying this. وها هنا يعني بغداد. وقال علي بن حرب أتينا زيد بن الحباب فلم يكن له ثوب يخرج فيه إلينا فجعل الباب بيننا وبينه حاجزا وحدثنا من ورائه رحمه الله. And the fantastic thing about this book, by the way, is the last 3 or 4 stories that he presents. There's one story here. This is Al-Khabr al-Thalith about Imam Abu Hatim ibn Hibban, the famous Ibn Hibban, the author of the Sahih. His story is very inspiring. But perhaps the most interesting and most beneficial story that I found, which really inspired me as well, was the story of Ibrahim ibn Ishaq al-Harbi, and how he, there's a story here wherein he's not got enough provisions for his family, so his wife tells him, هب أني أنا وإياك نصبر فكيف نصنع بهاتين الصبيتين. That sell your books, we need food, how we can survive, but what about the children? So he tells her, that don't worry, calm down. اقترضي لهما شيئا وأنظرني بقية اليوم والليلة. Give me one day and one night. And he's thinking, what can I do? I mean, I've given her one day and one night in which I need to provide now food for my family, and she's telling me to sell my books. I don't want to sell my books. So he says, وَكَانَ لِي بَيْتٌ فِي دِهْلِيزِ دَارِي فِيهِ كُتُبِي فَكُنْتُ أَجْلِسُ فِيهِ لِنَسْخ. So he says, I'm sitting in my library. فَلَمَّا كَانَ فِي تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَ إِذَا دَاقٌ يَدُقُّ الْبَابِ. Suddenly someone knocks on the door. فَقُلْتُ مَنْ هَذَا? So I said, who is this? فَقَالَ رَجُلٌ مِّنَ الْجِيرَانِ فَقُلْتُ أُدْخُلْ. So someone comes in and he says, I'm just your neighbor. He comes in, he gives him some money, and then he says فدخل الدهليز فوضع فيه سرة كبيرة وقال لي إنا أصلحنا لصبياننا طعاما فأحببنا أن يكون لك وللصبيان فيه نصيب هذا شيء آخر فوضعه إلى جانب السرة الكبيرة وقال تصرفه في حاجتك وأنا لا أعرف الرجل وتركني وانصرف. A man just comes in, gives him loads of money, gives him more than what he needs, and then walks off. And it's just really, really inspiring. If you read the full story, it's really, you can feel his emotions. And then there's one poem here wherein it's of Al-Jurjani, wherein Jurjani speaks about the izzah of ilm and how we must, look after the izzah of ilm and, have value for Islamic knowledge, have value for what we have, and that we don't need to turn towards the world, and we can essentially, do well with our knowledge. There's a long poem here, if I can find it. Otherwise, I will just send the picture on the group. I don't want the video to go above 12 minutes max, if I can. But here's the poem. So, not Sharif al-Jurjani, Qadi Abu al-Hasan Ali ibn Abd al-Aziz al-Jurjani. This is his poem, and Shaykh Abdul Fattah is quoting it from Izzuddin al-Zanjani, who's got the longest version of this poem. So he says, يَقُولُونَ لِي فِيكَ انْقِبَاضٌ وَإِنَّمَا رأوا رجلا عن موقف الذل أحجما أرى الناس من داناه مهان عندهم ومن أكرمته عزة النفس أكرما. That, they tell me you're too backward, you're too reserved, you don't come out much. But rather what they are seeing is a person who's protecting himself from disgrace. The more you hang out with people, the more you kind of interact with people, and you don't spend some time with your books and being alone and isolation to some degree, you're more open to kind of like disgrace, and more people will kind of speak negatively about you. It's part of life. But in any case, this is a fantastic kitab. It's kind of big. I do want to mention that it is it's on the bigger range for beginners to read. So it's 395 pages, as you can see. But the book will challenge you in certain places with the Arabic, but you will really, really enjoy reading this book. And honestly, it will inspire you. You will find some fantastic stories in there, and I do hope to share some of my broken notes here and there on the Islamic Knowledge Telegram channel, if you do want to join that channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like it, then give it a share and give it a like as well. And please subscribe to the Islamic Knowledge YouTube channel. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum.